Welcome back to another Ennovation review. Today, we're going to talk about the GT250 from Kracken Adventure Bikes. First, let's talk about the looks. The looks on the GT250 are very reminiscent of Go Cycle. Now, this is not a direct comparison as they're kind of in different categories in my opinion, but it is small, it is portable, it does have some cool flashy colors to it, and it caters to a pretty specific use case. As you can tell, this is a folding bike. We can fold it here in the middle, and then we can also fold the stem down, so this is going to turn into a nice little package. Perfect for somebody who wants an electric bike, but doesn't have a lot of room to store it. This sort of e-bike is going to be something that is pretty ideal for people in their RV. Maybe you're going to throw it in the back and then take it out at a national park or something like that. Or we've also got people who might want to throw this in a boat, travel around to different areas, but want to have some mobility once they get there. So from a looks perspective, it has a very cool vibe about it, so let's go ahead and dive into some of the specs here. First, let's talk about the motor. The motor we have here is a 250 watt eco motor. As you can imagine, the motor here does not have a whole lot of get up and go, but it has a very smooth ramp up to its top speeds. And once it gets to those top speeds, it was able to just give me a continuous output so I could cruise around at the speeds that it was capable of. As far as the noise goes, this was virtually silent. It was a very quiet motor. Now, most of the motors that we test are, 500. We've had some 350s, but most of them are like 500 watts, 750 watts. So those are bigger motors. There's kind of more going on there. And when we're comparing this motor to some of those bigger motors that we normally test, this motor was pretty much silent. Next, let's talk about the battery. The battery we have here is a 36 volt, 8.7 amp hour, 313 watt hour lithium ion battery. One of the cool things about this battery is it is lockable and removable. All you have to do is get the key, insert it, there's a little button here at the bottom, and you can pull the battery out and put the battery back in. Definitely a very handy feature to have, and if I'm thinking about somebody in an RV, and let's say they wanted to charge the battery while they're going from one spot to another spot, they can throw the bike in the back wherever the bike's going to be stored, but they can have that battery somewhere where they got a power supply and can be charging the battery as they're driving. I think the removable battery was a good call there. It takes about 5 hours for a full charge, and then once you've got that thing charged up, you should be able to get anywhere between 30 to 35 miles. Again, we have a smaller battery than some of the other ones that we've seen, but we're also drawing a lot less power with that 250 watt motor. As we were riding around doing our testing of the bike, I was able to get right around that 30 miles, so I think that that's a fair estimate. And since I was testing it, we were using the throttle a little bit here, higher levels of pedal assist, so if you keep it at a lower level of pedal assist, you're not trying to go too fast, and you're on pretty flat ground, I think hitting 35 miles is pretty reasonable. Next, let's talk about the brakes. The brakes we have here are Zoom mechanical disc brakes with 160 millimeter rotors both on the front and the rear. Now, with this bike, it being a little bit on the lighter side, right around that 40-ish pounds, and the speeds only going up to that 18, 19 miles per hour, having the mechanical brakes is probably sufficient for all of the riding you'd be doing on this particular bike. As far as stopping power goes, you'll see later in the ride test portion, we do a couple of brake tests. This thing was able to stop going from the top speed 6 to 7 feet, which is plenty fast enough to get you out of most situations you'd be slamming on your brakes for. Next, let's talk about the gears. This will probably be the shortest chapter here because this is a single speed bike. Now, based on the use case, I think that was a pretty good decision. A lot less mechanical components that could go wrong on this particular bike. And as far as the gear ratio goes, I was finding that I was getting a little bit of ghost pedaling when I was going at the top speed. The GT250 has 3 levels of pedal assist, and I found that when I was in pedal assist level 2, anywhere between that 11 to 14 mile per hour range, that was pretty much where it would cap out as far as feeling like it was a good, consistent pedaling. And once you get to pedal assist level 3, I felt like there was a lot less resistance when I was pedaling, but it wasn't to the point where it was super uncomfortable. I just noticed that it wasn't quite as in sync as when I was in pedal assist level 2. Next, let's talk about the extras. The GT250 is pretty much fully loaded when we consider the types of things we would want to see on a bike like this. We have got fenders both on the front and the rear. We've got an integrated front headlight and an integrated rear taillight in that back fender there. We have got folding pedals, rear suspension. We've also got a separate control for the lights and the included horn. Next, let's talk about the essentials. All the GT250s ship with a user manual, the charger, and a couple tools to help you put on the front stem. I I was talking with the guys over at Kracken, and they were telling me that with the next batch, they plan to have those stems pre-installed on the bikes, so even the little bit of installation that I had to do won't be something for future customers of the bike. Next, let's talk about the folding. As we have mentioned, and is very obvious, this is a folding bike. I found that all of the folding mechanisms here were smooth and easy to operate, so they weren't too loose to where it felt like a little bit of a safety concern, and they weren't too tight to make it difficult to fold it and unfold it. Everything just functioned really well. And once we got the bike folded up, those dimensions are 35 inches by 25 inches by 27 inches. And that's fairly small compared with a lot of the folding bikes that we've reviewed in the past. That being said, they are usually bigger bikes, they've got bigger tires on it, but with those dimensions, I feel like it could fit into a lot of different spaces. Next, let's talk about the suspension. The GT250 has rear suspension, and I found that to be extremely helpful. Now, the GT250 does have smaller tires, so we're going to have less of an attack angle here, meaning we're going to feel those bumps a little bit more when we compare that with a bigger tire. So having the inclusion of this rear suspension was excellent. The ride here was super smooth. I took it off-road, what you would consider off-road for this bike, on some dirt trails, things like that, and it was a smooth ride. The other part of suspension that we like to talk about are the tires. So these tires, again, kind of comparing it to bikes in this same category, they're a little bit more aggressive than some of the city tires that we've had. Again, thinking about marketing this to people in RVs, people on boats. More often than not, they will probably be on some, albeit paved, but maybe not quite flat cement surfaces all the time. And these Kendas are 16 inches by 2.125 inches. They've got a PSI range of 40 to 55, and they have regular Schrader valves on here. We usually like to see sidewall reflective stripes on tires, so these ones don't have that, so maybe that would be a cool upgrade to see for future models. The other part of suspension we like to talk about is the butt suspension. The saddle here is this unbranded comfort style saddle, and all in all, it was fairly comfortable. If I was going to keep this bike long-term, probably not something I would switch out, but it was a little bit on the thinner side for me. But as you guys know, you got to match up your saddle to your sit bones, so saddles are going to be different for everybody. And with saddles, it's a fairly easy thing to just switch out to find something that fits you perfect. Next, let's talk about the controls. The display we have is over here on the left-hand side, and this is a grayscale LCD with a 2-button layout. One of the most interesting things about this, I thought, it being a 2-button layout, you're like, how am I going to go pedal assist up and down? Well, you cycle through them with a single button click. So if you're in pedal assist level 0, you would go 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and then 3 to 0. So that was something I had to get used to at first, but once I got used to it, it's pretty easy. The readouts that this display will tell us are going to be our speed, the odometer, the level of pedal assist that we're in, and if the lights are on or off. Next, let's talk about who this bike might be for. As we have alluded to several different times, this is something that I really see being mainly for people in RVs, people on boats, people that have a very small amount of space, and they just need something to go around, maybe get out 15, 20 miles, something like that. And so that is the way that we've approached this review, is looking at if it was going to be that, how does the bike stack up? How does it handle? Now, if we were looking at this and saying, is this a commuter? Well, the answer is no. This would not be a good commuter. So in my opinion, those are the people that own RVs, boats, things like that. They're going to be getting the most out of this bike. As far as the geometry measurements go, it has a 16-inch reach, which is very approachable. Pretty much everybody can handle that. And a 21.5-inch standover height. The standover height is super approachable. I don't see a lot of people having problems with that particular height, but those are two measurements with the reach and the step over height that I always recommend people look at to make sure the bike's going to fit you. The other measurements here are a 26-inch minimum saddle height, a 31-inch maximum saddle height, 22.5-inch width at the handlebars, a 40-inch wheelbase, and a 54-inch length overall. And as we mentioned earlier, the folding size here is 35 inches by 25 inches by 27 inches. If I'm looking for the ideal customer here for the GT250, I'm thinking they're middle-aged and up, they own an RV, they're out and about, they're traveling the world, and they want to take along with them something they can explore the environment without having to walk all the time. And that's going to cover it for the nuts and bolts of the bike, so let's send it outside for the ride test. All right, guys, we are out here for the ride test on the GT250. Now, this is a single-speed bike, so we're not going to talk about any of the shifting, because guess what? We don't have to do any shifting. But if you didn't want to turn this bike on and you wanted to pedal it around, you could still do so. And the gearing here is pretty nice for a nice, leisurely pace. Probably right about here. Probably doing 8 to 9 miles per hour. It's a really good cadence. I'm able to get, some pretty good leg extension here. And it's still, fairly upright position. I mean, well, it's upright. It's pretty much straight up and down. So very comfortable here. The saddle's not too bad. Fits me pretty well. Definitely a little bit on the cushy side. Lots of foam there, but we've also got that rear suspension, which makes the whole thing, you know, even that much more comfortable of a ride. The brakes we got here, these Zoom brakes, doing pretty good. They are mechanical, but that is not a downside for this bike, in my opinion, because it's not too heavy and we're not going that fast. So once we turn the display on here, it's going to show us a few things like we talked about. It's going to show us our speed, battery level, pedal assist down over here. And oh, there's a big puppy. I love puppies. So let's go ahead and put it in pedal assist level 1. And we'll just pedal it around a little bit. We'll see how she behaves. Very easy, sort of very smooth ramp up here with the pedal assist. Again, kind of going that 17, 18 kilometers per hour. Not too bad with the pedaling here in pedal assist level 1. And we go to pedal assist level 2. Now the thing that's interesting about this bike when we compare it with really most of the other bikes that we see is they're kind of this, you know, there's just up and down, but there's only 2 buttons here. And this one is just going to cycle through our levels of pedal assist. So it's going to go from 0 to 3. So we can go ahead and put it in pedal assist level 3. And that's going to take us up to, well, tell you what, let's do a little, so let's stop a little bit. Very easy stop. And we'll go there. Might as well obey the rules, you know what I'm saying? And it's going to take us up to that full speed of 28 kilometers per hour. Now this particular display doesn't change into miles per hour. So that's some people go look at that and say that's a negative thing in the US market. We want to see things in miles per hour. But maybe it's just an opportunity for you to learn the conversion rate between miles per hour and kilometers per hour. You know, I had to do that at some point, and it's a good skill. It's a good skill to have. Now, once we are kind of at this top speed, hitting that 28 kilometers per hour, 25 kilometers per hour, excuse me, the top speed here, we do lose a little bit of resistance with the pedaling. So as far as the gearing goes, that's probably something that could be improved. When we have these single speed bikes, that is generally one of the things that it's kind of difficult to find that sweet spot. But if you were looking around to go, you know, at top speed all the time, maybe you look at that and say, like, you know, I might like that to be a little bit different, because as we're pedaling bike, we kind of want that in resistance. But the way that I've seen this bike marketed and the way that King Kracken has told me this bike is supposed to perform, it's really something that you are using to cruise around, something you're going to throw in the RV, something you're going to throw in the boat. So if you're cruising around in pedal assist level 1, 15, 16 kilometers per hour, this is pretty much perfect for sightseeing, or, you know, just cruising around the campsite, heading to the bathroom. If you're not in an RV that has a bathroom, anybody has camped before, you know, it's important to know where the bathrooms are out there. There's also some people in the comments probably like, hey, where's the bathroom out there? But if you are in a campground with other people, that's not always the right answer. So as we're pedaling kind of this pedal assist level 2, starting to get a little bit less resistance here with the pedaling, but it's still not too bad. And one of the things I like about this particular bike, and thinking about who it's geared for, you know, get the people in RVs, people in boats, things like that, it does have a little bit of a more aggressive tire on here. These Kendas, they've got a little bit more tread than a lot of the bikes that we've seen with a lot of these small little folders. So it's kind of an interesting idea where we have the body style of something that's sort of that very small city style folder that, you know, people would imagine you're kind of throwing in your car or taking on the subway. But when we have these extra tires on here, you know, somebody in an RV could pop it out of the RV and they could hit up, you know, a hiking trail, if that's allowed, obviously, right? We got to follow the rules. But it could handle that sort of dirt path sort of scenario. So we're actually going to take it off-roading over here in just a minute, right up here at the end where we turned around earlier, and we'll check it out as far as its somewhat off-road capabilities. And then we'll go ahead and do a braking test. Now these brakes do have motor cutoff inhibitors, so as soon as we smack on those brakes, and that was a little bit of a skid there, but it's like 3 to 4 feet, you know, going these speeds. And we've got this throttle over here, which we haven't talked about yet. I'm gonna avoid that because last time I smashed that pole there. And now we're kind of out here on this dirt trail. You know, this is something that you typically see maybe in between campsites or, you know, different trails around, you know, national parks, places like that. Again, you know, being cautious of where you're allowed to do this sort of thing. And right here, we're just using the throttle. And let's go ahead and put it in pedal assist level 3. Again, just using the throttle. And even though we do have those, you know, fairly small tires, especially when we compare them with, you know, those big 26 by 4 inch tires that we've been doing a lot of reviews on recently, this is a very comfortable ride with that rear shock in there. So the seat's got a little bit of a cushion, and then we've also got the rear shock. So this whole ride is, yeah, it's very comfortable. It's surprisingly comfortable. I take this particular route on the KBO Breeze quite often, that I ride around a lot, and this is less of a bumpy ride than that. And that's even got, you know, those big tires, and it's even got some of that front suspension. But it seems like with that rear suspension, it's really absorbing all of the bumps to my rump, the rump bumps, if you will. So avoid sneaking up on that guy, causing a scene. And let's go ahead and pedal assist level 3. Again, a nice easy ramp up to that top speed. So as far as can this bike handle some of these, you know, smaller off-road trails, I think definitely is the right answer. Maybe something a little bit exclamatory could be yes. Yes is a good response there. And it's not too bad. I mean, I don't think I would want to do this for 20 miles or so, but if I was going to go hit a trail, I'm hitting 5 or 6, maybe 7 or 8, then this is definitely a reasonable thing to do with this bike. Again, avoid hitting those columns with that back GoPro. I can't remember which bike it was, but we were on one, and I tore through there, and I hit the rear GoPro on one of those pillars, and I smashed it back into the rims. It was a good time. I think it was the XF650 out, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. It was very muddy that day. And again, we're just cruising. We've had no issues with the brakes. The assembly for this bike was pretty much non-existent. The only thing that we had to do was put on the front stem, and that's it. So a little bit of work there to put that on. I've talked with the guys over at King Kracken, and they were saying that in the next batch they want to have that come fully assembled. So if that's the case, there's no assembly required. You're going to pop this thing out of the box, set it on the ground, and you're going to be good to go. Which is nice because even though there's probably some things that you want to go double check, and always double check that your brakes work, always double check that the seat is tied up. You know, there's lots of things that you can go through and check, but it takes a lot less time going through and checking a bike than it is to assemble these bikes oftentimes. Now that's just compared to that in the grand scheme of things, you know, 30 minutes to 45 minutes to put a bike together, not really a big deal. But it is nice that there's somebody who knows what they're doing, puts it together for you, and you're just kind of going through and making sure everything's tight and everything's good to go. Yeah, honestly, I could cruise around like this for quite some time. And then when you think about the form factor on this bike being fairly small, there's a lot of places you can store this thing. And you just pop it out, and then you're off and you're ready to roll. Now, thinking about the people who would be boating and bringing this out, now this is probably not something that would handle the sand very well, only because those tires are fairly small, and even with the smaller side of the PSI, it's still not quite ready for the sand. And if you're a medium to a bigger rider, like I'm about 220, 215, depending who's asking, and this is probably maybe not the max that this bike can handle, but if you are on the sand, you definitely would want to be lighter, and it would have to be hard packed sand. And so for the sand in general, you know, if you're going up to a beach somewhere, you pull up on the boat and you want to pull this out and ride down the beach, I don't know if that's necessarily what you'd want to do with this particular bike. Probably look at something with fatter tires, at least 3, probably 4 is your best bet there. But if you're not doing any of that sort of stuff, then this is a nice little bike with a small little form factor. Again, having those brakes is nice. We got this integrated bell, and we got a horn. Let everybody know you're coming. See if I can't wake up the neighborhood here. And then we do have the lights, and we haven't really talked about that. So if you hold down this button over here on this side, this is going to, I'm sorry, if you press it, you double press it? No, just press it. It'll turn on the lights, but that's not actually what controls the lights on this bike. It's got its own little keypad over here. So the light will display here, but that is not controlling the lights. You're just gonna press it on this side, boom, and then, I don't know if you can see that, the light coming out of there. Now, as far as nighttime riding goes, probably not a bike that is 100% ready to go out into the pitch black of night, but you know, you do have a light here, you can be seen. But if you were thinking about those RV people, you're out there, you know, campgrounds, the woods, you'd probably want to look at something that had a little bit more lumens to it. And I don't know if upgrading the headlight on this particular bike makes sense, or just look for some, you know, third-party options where you could kind of mount this light up higher, get it up here, and have a little bit more distance, a little bit more throw in the light world is what they call it. So those are probably upgrades that I would look at doing personally. Now, once the lights are on, we do have that tail light in the back. The brake levers aren't going to flash on it. So if we go and, you know, pull the brake levers, we're not going to flash and let people know we're stopping, which would be a really cool upgrade to see. However, it is going to be on, so it's going to allow people to see you if you are riding at night or towards dusk, things like that. And again, out here on these trails, very capable, you know, fairly comfortable ride here. All right, guys, that is going to do it for our review of the GT250 from Kracken Adventure Bikes. If you guys want to know more, I'll have a link to their website down below. And if you guys have any questions for me, or there wasn't anything specific we covered in this video, please let me know down in the comments. I love talking to you guys, and we'll catch you on the next one.